Alright, so I'm gonna show you a little bit more how the vote actually travels through all of the AWS components and hits my Python script. So this is my EC2 and the Python script constantly running. As you can see, it's gonna be showing A, B because it processes them as they travel through components, and they hit DynamoDB table. They're stored in DynamoDB table, all of the votes, and yeah, you can see how the website is constantly being rendered. You can see there is actually changes and the line is moving, showing who is actually winning right now. Right now is candidate A, and he has about 62.1% votes. So if we actually look back at the original diagram, right, this vote processor, this Python script that you can see here, this could actually be implemented as a separate EC2 instance, which it is now. It is a separate EC2 instance running, or it could be implemented as a launch template target group. Another option is to use auto-scaling group on demand or auto-scaling group spot on demand. I'm actually going to implement probably all four options. Right now I'm only using one separate EC2 instance. Another thing that I'd like to show you is the actual S3 buckets. So the first thing, the way you start this project is you actually create the buckets, you make them public, you make them publicly accessible. This is the voting bucket. It has about 3 files, index.html and style and my icon. The files were provided as is, but I had to tweak them a little bit. The permissions, so let me show you the permissions. So for CloudFront to work properly with S3, you have to enable the bucket policy, and in the bucket policy you need to have this particular statement, which is basically stating that this particular principal, this CloudFront origin access identity, this is not a user, this is actually a service identity. It should be allowed to get objects from S3 based on this resource. So it's getting all of the objects. It's getting all of the objects, the star says all. It's getting all of the objects from the front-end Yerjan vote S3 bucket, which it is. Another thing that I had to struggle here with was cross-origin resource sharing course policy. For the bucket, you don't actually have to deal with it because it is the course policy is located in API gateway. Now let me show you the second bucket, the bucket that actually renders this particular bucket. So the dumbest mistake that I made was that I forgot to actually enable it for static websites. So I was looking for the source of error, and this one was disabled. So this has to be enabled, obviously. For the permissions and policies, I also have to put the statement in my bucket policy that states that this particular CloudFront has to be allowed to get all objects from result front end. I also started working with course policy for the S3 bucket, but you don't have to deal with it. This can be left empty. The next thing that you have to deal with is API gateway. This API gateway icon and this one, they actually represent one API gateway. So let me show you. API gateway is an API management tool. It allows you to basically process all of the API calls through one outlet, through one central location. This is my API. It is one API endpoint, this particular API endpoint. So you do slash and then you have your route to a particular function. So this is voting, which is post. As you can see, this can only accept post requests, and this is results, which is get. Each of them is connected to the lambda backend functions. So these two lambda backend functions, voting backend lambda and result backend lambda, these two lambda functions get triggered through API results get and post voting requests. Yeah. These are the integrations. So as you can see, it is AWS Lambda. The actual core settings that you have to work with located here. They're located here, not in the S3 buckets. They're located here. You have to allow certain headers, and you have to allow origin. Now, adding CloudFront integration was particularly challenging for me. Let me show you something. So if I try to just get this thing, right, without HTTPS, it's not gonna work. It's not gonna work. It's gonna say invalid format. So I was thinking that there is no way to add. Actually, the problem was that you have to add HTTPS and everything works. So if you add HTTPS, the CloudFront endpoints, it works nicely. Yeah, so this is pretty much it about the cross-origin resource sharing. There is nothing else to look at. The next component is probably Lambda functions. So let's go to Lambda functions. You have to create them sequentially as I'm describing the AWS components. First you go and create S3 buckets, then API gateway, then Lambda. So as you can see, we have two Lambda backend functions. They are both just Python scripts. So the first one is voting. So whenever you vote, as you can see, what triggers this Lambda function is API gateway, and it sends it to SNS, just like as you can see it here. So this is the trigger, API gateway, and this is the destination. The code itself, I have to tweak it a little bit. There is some log statements here. So basically, whenever you get a message, whenever a post request is generated, whenever you do a click here, a post request is generated. When a post request is generated, it has a certain structure. Like here, for example, it has this kind of structure, something like this. It has message attributes, vote, string value, D, and you have to process it. You have to get the right value, message, voter, string value, and you have to publish vote. Publish vote is nothing but just using Boto3 client and sending it to actual notification topic, which travels to basically the destination, the topic arn. You specify the topic arn and the actual message. The actual message is empty, as you can see, and the message attributes is what you actually need to do, what you need to include. The login info says message published success. You can actually check out these logs in the CloudWatch. Then it goes to SNS and SQS. Now, there's really nothing interesting in simple notification and simple queue service, except that you have to create them. Then it travels to vote processor EC2. Vote processor itself is a pretty interesting and pretty complicated, in my opinion, thing. So I'm going to cover it in the next video.